Waiting for that go live button. Oh, yep, there we go. All right, looks like things are doing good. Trying a new camera setup today, so very exciting. All right, checking on. Okay, so now Facebook is live. Great. Okay, so YouTube looks good. Facebook looks good. All right. So I want to talk today about turning the other cheek and what that looks like. And so this is going to end up being a little, specific. Today's conversation is going to be sort of area specific, and so if this isn't it, basically, if you don't live in my neighborhood in Brookhaven, you might not be aware of some local vandalism that's going on. However, what I want to talk about, that was the inspiration for today's reflection. But I'm afraid to say is that this kind of situation affects everyone. And turning a blind eye to it, or thinking that, your area is not prone to either vandalism or crime or some kind of misdeed, is a dangerous place to live in. Places that we live in are dangerous, but what I'm speaking is there's an emotional, it is dangerous emotionally and mentally and physically to ignore certain realities of the world. And that's what I want to talk about today. So just some backstory. In recent days, there's been a spat of local vandalism going on around Brookhaven, with some downtown businesses, and also around at least my neighborhood that I'm aware of. It may have been happening in other neighborhoods as well. And what it turns out is that some people were going around and shooting ball bearings and marbles or other like hardened balls with slingshots through people's windows and things like that, causing some storefront damage, causing some residential damage, hitting car windows, things like that. In some cases, you could see like the ball bearings were at such a velocity that they were not only puncturing windows but also punching through the blinds of people's houses. These were projectiles traveling at such a velocity as to seriously injure someone were they to hit someone. And that's very disturbing. Luckily, no one, to my knowledge, was hurt, but and God be praised that didn't happen. But it's very scary. But I want to talk not just about those individuals who did that. Some suspects have been arrested by the police. We'll see what comes with that. But at the same time, that is not an isolated incident. That kind of stuff happens wherever you live. For years and years, I lived in the Belhaven neighborhood in Jackson, which is a great historic neighborhood. But it has a proximity to downtown Jackson, and so there were crimes that went on. There were people that got mugged. I've had my car rifled through. I had a fellow who actually lived down the street, but was like on drugs or something, and was basically squatting on my back porch trying to get into my house because he was convinced that he was supposed to be there. And so I'm not Um, I have not been seriously or violently robbed, um, but I'm not completely unaccustomed to attempted robbery, or in some cases, like successful robbery of my car and things like that. Um, and yet, I say all that to say, I've noticed a strong feeling of hurt and anger in our community about this. And that's normal. You should feel uncomfortable. You should feel violated by those kinds of occurrences. And don't be ashamed of those feelings. However, I would also caution what people do with the energy behind those feelings, because I've seen things online and heard conversations that, frankly, steer, I think, in an unhelpful and scary direction. I'm not saying everybody who took to the internet to talk about the recent happenings is bad or good, but I would encourage people to take pause and ask themselves, is what I'm saying or what I'm promoting veering into realms of vigilantism or racism or assumptions about people on a whole? Not that we shouldn't be upset when bad things happen to us, but we should police ourselves in how we conduct our discussions, either in groups or online. And so all that to say is that's where I'm coming from. That's the energy I'm with. That's the place I'm sitting, where I'm reflecting upon parts of Scripture that might give me some place to go. And so the first thing I turned to was that part of the Sermon on the Mount that says, "Turn the other cheek." In Matthew, it says, "You have heard that it was said," or Jesus said, "You have heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles, to give the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you." The Sermon on the Plain, which is a similar chunk, but this time comes from Luke's Gospel. One, it has the commandment to love your enemies, but also Jesus says, "But I say to you, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. To the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And the one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from the one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would also do to you, and as you wish others would do to you, do so to them." Those are both from the English Standard Version. And that is a hard ask for Jesus to do. I mean, are we to allow our loved ones, our family members who depend on us, to be put in danger? Do we invite others to steal and to tear apart or to vandalize our homes and put our loved ones at risk? No, we should not do that. But also, by the same token, we should measure how we respond. For me, keeping my family safe is paramount, more than my own life. So I do take the threat of projectile ball bearings that could easily seriously hurt or, God forbid, fatally injure someone, I take those threats seriously. But I also don't cheer for the idea of shooting them in the street with a handgun. There are many popular interpretations to this turn the other cheek message from Jesus. So the one that's gravitating with me, I'm going to go through a few of them right now. The one that's gravitating with me right now is Jesus quotes the Exodus 21 verses 24 through 25. That Exodus line, eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It was meant to, in the original Exodus context, it was guidance for judges to dispense judgment and justice for those who have wronged another. But so when Jesus says, you have heard it say, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other also, the left cheek. Jesus is restoring the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth to a more original context. Jesus starts his statement by saying, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which would mean Jesus is clarifying a misconception about the phrase eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Notice Jesus didn't say, for it is written, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Jesus says, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So Jesus is clarifying the statement, not saying, here's a reference in Scripture you can use. The common misconception that Jesus is clarifying seemed to be that people were using Exodus 21 as justification for personal vengeance. However, the command to turn the other cheek would also not be a command to allow someone to rob a person, but a command to not seek vengeance. Basically, what Jesus is saying is, it is not our job to be vigilantes out in our streets. We have the police in place. We have other establishments in place to take care of that. Our job is to make sure that we are safe, but our job is not to dispense righteous justice. Now, on the extreme version of interpretations of this line, the turn the other cheek line, or actually, before I get to that, so there's also what's called the nonviolent resistance interpretation. A guy named Walter Wink talked about sort of the socio-historical context that if someone strikes you on the right cheek, present the other one, the left cheek, what that would mean. And so Wink says that striking backhand a person deemed to be of lower socioeconomic class was a means of asserting one's authority and dominance. If the persecuted person turned the other cheek, then that discipliner was faced with a weird dilemma, that the left hand was used for unclean purposes. So you would be striking with your left hand. And so the back of hand strike on the opposite cheek, the left cheek, would not be performed, because if you struck someone with your open palm, that was a challenge against a person. It was you weren't demeaning them by a backhand slap. You were proposing an actual challenge with an open hand slap again on the left cheek, and that would have been a sign of equality. Basically, by turning the other cheek and having someone and presenting the left cheek for them to have to slap you with, they would have to do it with their open hand, which would be them saying that I'm coming to you on equal ground when I do this. So it was a subversive way of bringing your accuser or someone who meant to demean you and present dominance. It was a way to subtly make them think of you as equal. Also, there's that part where Jesus says, if you would walk a mile for someone, walk two. This is a tweak of the nose for this Roman law that said Roman authorities could demand anyone within an occupied area or territory to send messages for them or to carry equipment for them up to 1 mile. So basically, Roman authorities could conscript anyone at any time to run a message or carry equipment for them up to 1 mile. If they went past 1 mile, the Roman authority would be subject to disciplinary action. So Jesus is saying, no, go walk 2. Basically, put them in an awkward position to where they are going to get themselves in trouble by asking you, by you showing extra courtesy, extra help, presenting extra work that would get them in trouble. Again, also talking about if someone sues for your cloak, give them your tunic also, or the Sermon on the Plain kind of inverts those clothing options. But basically, if you were suing someone and they were giving their cloak and their tunic as well, the debtor was reduced to nakedness, essentially. You're basically suing the literal pants off them. And that public nudity was viewed as bringing shame to the viewer, not just the person who was naked. So if you were naked in public, it brought shame to the person who saw you naked as well. And so basically, if you are giving them over your tunic also, you are bringing shame to that person who is suing the pants off you. Basically, these are all subtle ways that would be contextually evident to the listener of the day. Basically, kill them with kindness, essentially is what Jesus is saying. Do so much for them that they bring shame upon them in their stance. And that is, I think, the point of Jesus' discussion in the Sermon on the Mount. And if you look at where this line is couched within this larger Sermon on the Mount, it makes perfect sense as to Jesus' overall argument. That blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the children, for they are be called the children of God. Blessed are the humble, the meek. All of these things you could tell with the energy with which, the direction with which Jesus is going in these discussions, as to where this turn the other cheek message is going. So turning the other cheek is not being just laying down and taking it. It's not being a heel. It's an active sense of sort of like civil disobedience, and a cautionary tale against vigilantism. All right, and there are other more, I guess, wackadoo, kind of extreme versions of turning the other cheek. One of them is Christian anarchism, which essentially says that this line is evidence that the only real authority in the world is God's authority, and that so much so that every other system of authority is basically nothing, and that we should get rid of everything, like, for example, all forms of government. Tolstoy was a big thing of it. Was a big proponent of this. Some more extreme examples of libertarianism, would say something similar. Anyway, that's about as much about into that as I'm gonna get, because I think that's a little bit too far fetched. I don't think that's well rounded enough to even really consider. My point being is that, should we be complete doormats? No. We should lock our doors. We should, have a security camera. There's talk of putting cameras in the entrances to the neighborhood. I'm fine with that. I think that's a great idea. But also, I think getting too excited about being able to exact justice on a, fairly dense neighborhood yard or street is a little bonkers, especially the kinds of things that we have in our homes these days. It's not like we're walking around with a baseball bat. People have much more deadly projectile things in their house. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. Is if you or your family or your neighbors are sounding a little too vengeance happy, maybe ask them why that's their first response, or why that's their go-to solution. I don't think we should be excited about finding a justifiable way to get to kill people. It's a bit hard. If anything, if that's where we have to go in life, then we should, that should make us want to cry. All that to say, do keep your family and your home safe. Take steps, get alarms, get security systems, get cameras, things like that. We have to lift each other up. And yeah, here at the church, we have people break into our locked dumpster because they need stuff that bad. And it angers the mess out of me, because I'm really tired of people causing a terrible mess around our dumpster just to get clothes that even Angel's Attic couldn't take or give away to Goodwill, stuff that even Goodwill wouldn't take. Because if those individuals, those people living with homelessness, are in such great need as they're dumpster diving in the cast-offs of Angel's Attic and Goodwill in our dumpster, we'll hook you up. Like, stop breaking our storage shed lock or circumventing our dumpster if you need clothes that bad, because it's getting expensive. Stop breaking our stuff to get trash clothes. We can hook you up with just some clothes. Yeah, that's the kind of thing we need to be focused on. How can we help people out if they are in that great of a need? How can we help them out to where they're not breaking our stuff or causing harm or fear? That's how we should go that extra mile to do it, to disarm someone who is that desperate. And again, you're blurring the lines between some teenagers causing some vandalism versus someone who is in need of clothing for their back and food for their belly. So I'm kind of conflating two different types of people who are in two different places in their life. But I think our response should be that of how can we help you better so that you don't have to be so desperate, whether it's seeking attention, seeking control, finding, having something better to do with your time. In the case of the vandalism, but also to everyone who went online and wrote about how crazy this was, or like it was like literally the world was coming apart. I see a lot more dangerous, deadly things in the news, and so I think putting where we are in Brookhaven, Mississippi, in perspective with the pain and suffering around the world, put that in perspective of the different kinds of suffering around the world that people live with every day, and hopefully let that stir compassion in your heart. It's hard to do. This is hard to do, loving your neighbor as yourself, because sometimes people suck. Turning the other cheek, yeah, but I didn't really want the first cheek to get slapped in the first place. I get that. But that's the world sometimes. And how we respond to that, the grace, the radical, odd, overwhelming grace that we can express to people because we know, love, and serve Christ and God our Father, I think that will change the world and make it a place where this kind of crime or vandalism or what have you is less common. At least that's my prayer. Well, I hope you gained something from this conversation. If you have any thoughts or questions about that, or you want to talk to me about what I've said, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, I'd love to enter into a dialogue, because that's how we learn. So hit me up online. You can go to RedeemerBrookhaven.com and see all of our details. You can contact me at the church that way, or you can send me an email, or if you want to sit down and have a conversation, I'm happy to do that as well. Many blessings to you, dear ones, and as always, God bless.